Hi, my name is Imran Haque and welcome to another episode of The Voice of a Leader, the series where I interview high-achieving leaders and try and find out how they got to where they are. On the 27th of January 2017, Donald Trump, the President of America, signed an executive order in relation to border security and immigration. As part of this executive order, people from 7 majority Muslim countries are banned from entering the US for 90 days. I caught up with Julian Burnside, who is a QC lawyer and human rights and refugee advocate, to get his perspective on this issue. Julian, welcome back to The Voice of a Leader. So as you're aware, as part of Donald Trump's recent immigration ban, people from 7 majority Muslim countries are banned from entering the US for up to 90 days. And also, he's reduced the number of refugees that can be accepted by the US from 110,000 to 50,000. So what's your opinion on this issue?
I think it is, well, I think it's outrageous. And I think it is a continuing part of what looks very much like a coup in America. And at the broadest, I think Donald Trump is trying to provoke a war with Iran, which is a horrifying prospect. But it also, it makes a number of fundamental mistakes. First of all, he seems to work on the mistaken view that anyone from a Muslim country is therefore a threat to America, which is idiocy. Second, it completely overlooks Indonesia, which is, I think, has one of the largest Muslim populations in the world. Yeah. So it's hard to take him seriously. It doesn't sound like a thought-out policy. 3, he has put a longer ban on the reception of refugees in America, which is a serious mistake because, once again, it ignores the human realities of what's going on in the world at the moment. It also kind of overlooks the idea that people who are fleeing terrorism are probably not terrorists, and if you want to radicalise people, treat them badly, just like he's doing. The application of his executive order included a 5-year-old child being handcuffed in an American airport for a number of hours, and when tasked with that, the administration's answer was, well, you never know what a 5-year-old might do. Now, that's just crazy,
that is crazy,
really crazy. I just can hardly believe, in connection with the executive order, a federal court judge ruled that the order was invalid to the extent that it involved holding people in places of arrival. And Trump's response to that was to abuse the judge and criticise the judge for having challenged the executive order. Now, that is the hallmarks of a coup. It's very, very dangerous when you get a man like Trump who is willing to trash institutions of state in order to get his own way. We will discover in the next little while whether America has the rule of law or the rule of men. The rule of law is what democratic societies are all about. The rule of men is what we last saw in the West during the reign of the Stuarts in England in the 17th century. Interestingly, the reign of the Stuarts, which led to the creation of the American nation. Yep. The American colonies were settled by people fleeing the rule of men, characterised by the Stuarts. So maybe Donald Trump's presidency will see the end of the United States of America as we know it. I just hope that it's not going to come at the cost of a catastrophic war, because if he provokes a war with Iran, then you can bet your bottom dollar that the Russians will get in on it, either directly or as a proxy, and then we really all better pull our heads in and hide. And I
Understand.
hope the Australian government has the strength to avoid being drawn into something like that. Whether we have or not remains to be seen. But, God, what do you do? I mean, the man is insane. I think Trump is probably the worst president of the United States imaginable because he's a maniac. And I don't think he thinks very well. I think he sees the world as a business deal that he can do, or maybe as a reality show that he can star in. I'm not sure. He's a serious worry.
In terms of the refugees, why do you think he wants to? Because I think recently he joked about the idea of some refugees going from here to America. What does he have against refugees?
What does he have against refugees? Heaven knows. What has the Australian government got against refugees? I mean, I think their complaint at the moment might be that there's quite a few of them. Well, that just means that the opportunity for a humanitarian response is greater. It's interesting, over the Christmas break I spent quite a bit of time in conversation with people in various European countries concerning the treatment of refugees. What was interesting was the striking difference between the Australian response on the one hand and the American response more recently, and the response in Britain. People I spoke to in London and in Edinburgh and in other parts of Scotland was, these people are human beings. We need to look after them. We need to understand that they're human beings and that they need help. It's very, very different from the response in Australia, where it seems to be, no, this is our patch. We're going to keep it to ourselves. We're not going to let anyone come in and share it, just in case, by sharing it, we should somehow diminish our own good fortune. The interesting thing is that in Britain, they are, I think, preserving their view of their own national character. In Australia, we are demolishing our national character, and it's very clear to me, speaking to people in other countries, that they don't regard Australia as a land of the fair go. They don't regard us the way we regard ourselves. They see us as cruel and selfish, and that's very sad. As for Donald Trump, well, he's just right out of left field. He's a maniac who's totally unpredictable, and who I suspect does not know what he thinks from minute to minute. But
what do you think will happen after 90 days? Do you think that ban will be long-term, or?
I don't know. I think the answer to that will depend on global political shuffling and manoeuvring. I don't know. I don't know, but it's the Chinese curse is, may you live in interesting times. Well, we are facing interesting times right at the moment, and I don't know how it's going to play out, but it does not look good. The only ray of hope was Angela Merkel, whose response to the movement of Syrian refugees looked decent and enlightened. I mean, that really was self-interest writ large, because Germany, like many other Western countries, has an ageing population, and they need people who are young and active and motivated. And refugees, by and large, are young and active and motivated. Unfortunately, the German citizens got beyond the point of seeing this as their saviour and resisted. But at least Angela Merkel had the right idea, and Scotland is doing the same. Scotland in the last 12 months has received more than 1,000 Syrian refugees and has settled them in various parts of Scotland, including quite small isolated areas. And I spoke to a lot of the locals in those small isolated areas, and they were enthusiastic about the refugees coming. I went to the Isle of Bute, which is in where the Clyde turns south, so it's right on the edge of Argyll. And the main town on the island of Bute is Rothesay. Rothesay is a pretty small town. I mean, it's got maybe 5,000 people. They have received a number of Syrian refugees, about 60 or 70 Syrian refugees. They had 100 volunteers from the Rothsay community offering to help look after the Syrian refugees who came there, because they said, these are human beings, we can help them and we should. And I think they also had an eye to the idea that there'll be more people going down to the local shop, buying a pint of milk or a loaf of bread or a newspaper, and but they thought, this is what we do. This is, we're decent people and this is what we do. It's wonderful to see a country standing up for its reputation and for its instinctive sense of itself, a thing which Australia has betrayed, a thing which America is now in the process of betraying.
So Scotland would be a good model for a country like Australia in America?
The Scottish attitude is one we should emulate. And it's surprising because, there are many people in Australia with Scottish heritage, and maybe that's where our sense of a fair go and a bit of decency comes from, but we've somehow forgotten it, or we've been persuaded by our politicians to forget it. And it's all the same line as Trump. We have said in this country, we've said explicitly that these people are illegal and we have to push them away as a matter of border protection. Donald Trump's recent executive order is predicated on the assumption that anyone from a Muslim country is in some way a threat to the country. What nonsense. What complete nonsense. They are selling their soul as a country. We've already trashed our soul as a country, and it's a great pity to see it happen, because if only America could set a good example, then there's a greater chance that Australia might emulate it. But at the moment it's all going south. And it's just about time for ordinary Americans and ordinary Australians to say, no, this is not what we are. We can do this a whole lot better. We're better than the way we're behaving.
So from an ordinary American point of view, what can they do?
I don't know whether ordinary Americans are able to impeach a president, but if they could, they should.
Yeah.
The one thing I desperately hope is that he does not get assassinated. That'd be.
I've heard a few times. Yeah.
It would be terrible. It is not the way. It is not the way to change a bad government. But I hope they find a decent way of getting rid of him, because otherwise he will trash their country. And I said it's a coup. It looks like a coup to me, and it will not be good for the world if there is a successful coup in America. Maybe it'll just wither on the vine. I don't know. I'm not. Global politics is not my thing. But boy, it looks like a coup. I think he's ruining the country.
Julian, thank you for your opinion. A lot of people respect you, including myself. So hopefully it has some influence to some people.
That's very kind of you to say. I'm sorry if it sounds a bit crazy. And I imagine, actually, if I think about it, what I'm saying does sound a bit crazy, but we're living in crazy times. Crazy stuff is happening. I regard myself as a political conservative, and I'm horrified at seeing what Trump is doing to America, and I'm horrified at the mute Australian response to what Trump is doing in America.
Yeah, well, I have a personal interest as well, because I'm Muslim myself, and it's just interesting because I don't think that a lot of the 9/11 people who are involved, none of their countries, especially Saudi Arabia.
Well, Saudi Arabia, they were mostly from Saudi Arabia, and
very suspicious.
Yeah, no, I don't even pretend to understand the inner workings of all of that. But I don't think it's any exaggeration to say that Islamophobia now is the new anti-Semitism. It is just a very, very nasty response, which, given that America claims to be a Christian nation and Australia thinks of itself as a Christian nation, Islamophobia is utterly incompatible with anything that was taught by Jesus Christ. And I say that as a person, I have no religion.
Yeah, I understand.
But I remember what I learned about Christianity. I remember reading about what it was that Christ taught. And Islamophobia and anti-Semitism would simply not pass muster. Maybe that's why they killed him. They didn't.
So I guess that's the final question I have is, because again, I have a personal interest in Muslim. In a country such as Australia, to make people understand or get over Islamophobia, what would you recommend people do? Like, talk to Muslims, like, one-on-one?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a good idea for them to actually meet some Muslims and see that they haven't got two heads and they're not all sort of champing the bit at the edge of the worst bits of Sharia law.
The media is very powerful.
Oh, the media's been terrible on this. But I mean, for a long time I've thought that one way to change Australian attitudes to boat people, especially from Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq and so on, is to just meet some, talk to them, see the human reality, and then say, okay, what's the right thing to do? But instead, we have politicians who, for their own reasons, run this sort of anti-Islam line, and the results are terrible. And quite frankly, I think there's a serious risk that some people in Australia and some people in America will be radicalised precisely because they don't like being part of a group that is constantly picked on. It wouldn't be surprising. I don't know. You can think about these things and come up with no answers at all. I don't know what the answer is. But what we're doing is plainly wrong. On any view, what we're doing is wrong. And it's going to end up in a bad place.
No, again, Julian, thank you for your input, and hopefully it has a positive impact on even like one person.
Yeah.
You can change the mind of one person, it's a victory for me.
Well, let me say, I'm not in despair.
Yeah.
I may sound as if I'm in despair, but I'm not. There's always the prospect of things getting better. And all it takes is for enough people to think, yeah, this is the wrong thing to do, we're going to do things better. Once that spreads, then with luck, things will get better. I've met loads of Muslims. I don't think I've ever met a Muslim who I wouldn't trust or who frightened me. I've met quite a few Christians who frighten me. Donald Trump, I think, is a Christian, and I think he's terrifying. We've got a few conspicuous Christians in federal parliament, people like Scott Morrison, who's a liar and a hypocrite, and claims to be a Christian. Tony Abbott, rather terrifying as Christians go. I think Malcolm Turnbull is also a practicing Christian. These people do not give Christianity a good name. We need to stand back and say, well, what is it about Muslims we're worried about? The problem started with September 11, 2001, because immediately after that, there were no longer terrorists, they were just Muslim terrorists. And in Australia, there were no longer boat people, just Muslim boat people. Even if they're Tamils from Sri Lanka, they were Muslim boat people.
Yeah.
Yeah?
It's become synonymous.
Yeah.
Muslim
and so Islamophobia was just below the surface in the attack on boat people since 2001. And it's a serious mistake.
Yeah, whenever they have like a major incident here, like that car massacre in the city, I was praying it's not a Muslim person. I was like, oh, the city being locked down.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's I think all Australians need to read a story by James Thurber, who was an American humorist writer from the 20s to the 50s, thereabouts. He wrote 2 books of fables for our time. Stories in the model of Aesop's fables, so all very short, very simple, all about little furry animals, and all with an explicit moral. And the last of the fables for our time that he wrote was called The Shore and the Sea. And it's about a lemming who's on his way home after a big night out, falls over, hits his head on a rock, sees stars, and starts running towards the cliff, blathering and carrying on. And other lemmings, hearing him, start following him and trying to figure out what he's rambling about. And until, as the author says, there were as many reasons for running as there were lemmings doing the running. And they all run past the cave of the philosopher lemming and over the cliff into the ocean, some shouting we are saved and others shouting we are lost. And the philosopher lemming tears up the history of his species, which he'd been writing for 20 years, and starts again. And the moral of the story is all men should strive to learn before they die what they're running from and to and why. And that's something which we need to think about in Australia at the moment, because I think we do not know what we're running from or to or why.
Is there anyone that you recommend people look up to get a better understanding of Muslims and the kind of people they are?
Walid Ali and his wife Susan Carlin, who's converted to Islam and is brilliant. And that's just a quick off-the-cuff answer. But they're two people I greatly admire who happen to be Muslim as well.
Do you know Yasmin Abdul-Majid?
I don't think so.
So she's like an advocate, Muslim advocate.
Look, I may have met her.
Yeah. She was in the dinner with Malcolm Turnbull, Walid Ali, and Susan Carlin.
Oh yeah.
She can get water to their dinner.
To be candid, I don't assess people or value them according to their religion. I don't know the religious views of most people that I know, and I frankly don't care. I don't care if they're Christian or Buddhist or Muslim or Jewish or Calathumpian. I really don't care, and that's why I never bother to find out and don't really think about it. I'm much more concerned about the way they are, the way they behave, what they think, and what their attitudes are.
So in your line of work, religion hasn't played like a large part in your decisions or anything?
It hasn't played any part at all. None at all. Religion and I parted company about... I was fairly serious about religious belief when I was at school. By the time I started at university, I was sort of... My God, that's 50 years ago this year. Back then, and I started thinking about things, I began to think, hang on, some of the stuff they've been teaching me doesn't sound plausible. And I just drifted away from it. And ever since then, frankly, I haven't been the least bit interested in what religious views people have or whether they have religious adherence at all. I just much more interested in knowing what a person is like and how they behave and how they think.
I think one of the issues these days is people, even just when they meet someone, as soon as they find out what religion they're from, they start judging. Yeah,
why would you bother finding out what religion they are? I mean, really?
Yeah, because there's all these preconceived ideas. So if you say I'm Buddhist, they're like, oh, positive light. Muslim, oh no, I'm already fearing this person. So
Yeah. Well, look, I understand that but it's not something I think about at all.
Okay, no problem. Look, thanks again, Julian, and I hope the best for the world and hopefully things get more positive. Thanks again. Thank you again for watching another episode of The Voiceover Letter. Julian has some powerful, powerful things to say, and hopefully we get some positives out of it. Please remember to visit my website, www.thevoiceoverletter.org, to watch all the other interviews in my series and also be kept up to date with what's going on. Thank you again for watching, and see you next time.